On the outskirts of Berlin stand traces of the supercity Adolf Hitler envisioned. Forgotten and abandoned, they are what remains of his attempt to build a new world capital. Hitler was responsible for death and destruction on an unprecedented scale. But he didn't only want to destroy, he wanted to build, to remodel his country according to his own vision. And this new city would be the project's showpiece.
There's nothing like this has ever been tried or achieved. Nobody has ever replanned, rebuilt a whole city in this way.
Hitler wanted structures bigger and better than anything that had been built before. A domed hall so large that the Eiffel Tower could fit inside. A stadium that would hold 400,000 people. But his dream was never fully realized, and it died with him at the end of the Second World War. After 6 decades of research and using new computer graphic technology, it's now possible to recreate the city that Hitler intended, to reflect the glory of the Third Reich. Germany, 1933. A nation weakened and embittered by the loss of the First World War. In the throes of economic depression, Adolf Hitler came to power with the seductive promise of a new future. A future where Germany would take its rightful place as a leading world power, as the greatest military power. Hitler would rebuild their nation. He would create a new capital on the site of Berlin, and it would be called Germania. Hitler would use buildings to symbolize Nazi supremacy, to stake a claim on a place in history, and as a means of presenting his carefully created image to the world. But Hitler needed a man to make it happen. Architect Albert Speer was only 28 years old. It would be his job to bridge the gap between Hitler's dreams and the reality of construction.
His youth was an important factor because he could, in that sense, become a kind of apprentice to Hitler. That is, he could build what Hitler was imagining.
Their partnership would survive until the very last days of Hitler's life. Together, they embarked on an ambitious project to design and build edifices that would both intimidate and overwhelm. That campaign began not in Berlin, but in southern Germany, the old Nazi heartland. The city of Nuremberg would host the spectacular Nazi Party's annual rallies. Speer designed a venue where the party faithful could celebrate the cult of their leader. Today, the site is derelict and overgrown, a memory of a shameful era. But Speer's vast open arena is still here. The size of a dozen football pitches, it's enclosed by 36 stone towers. At one end stands the Zeppelin Tribune, the platform where Nazi leaders addressed the uniformed ranks of the party. 60,000 people sat here to watch parades and military displays in the field below. Speer based his design on a stunning piece of classical Greek architecture, the Pergamon altar, which in 1913 had been transported brick by brick to Berlin's main museum. By copying its construction, Speer was claiming that the Nazis could rival anything in history.
This monument had a series of steps going down it, and then also a large colonnade behind it. Originally, there was a large colonnade behind us here.
But Speer didn't just copy what he saw. He set out to improve it. By extending the steps and adding tiered seating, he made the tribune much larger than its ancient inspiration. It took 3 years to build, and when it was finished, it was crowned with a 20-foot-tall swastika. Historian Paul Jaskot is in the corridors beneath the speaker's platform.
We're standing inside of one of the only remaining structures built by Albert Speer, the Zeppelin Tribune. What you're seeing here is the lobby space that was probably used as a preparation area for party officials before they would go up and speak at the Tribune stands above us.
Officials would walk out to address tens, even hundreds of thousands of people at the rallies. The surroundings were designed to convince the audience that they were part of something momentous. The walls of the lobby are faced with marble. The floor is polished granite. The ceiling is covered with a golden swastika design mosaic. Yet Speer's most memorable creation at the Nuremberg rally site was a one-off spectacle made not from stone or metal, but with light. At the 1934 rally, he used light to bring the masses together by enclosing them inside one huge outside space. Visible from up to 60 miles away, light soared 25,000 feet into the sky. The beams created what will become known as the Cathedral of Light. This rare footage captures the moment when the beams of 134 searchlights converged in the sky above the Zeppelin field.
Speer used them to create an effect of community in the sense that they surrounded the entire Zeppelin field, so thousands of people, and then the lights would form above your head, and it would give you the sense of being inside, although you were outside.
The success of the Nuremberg rallies convinced Hitler that the city needed a new indoor home for the party's massed conventions. The Congress Hall, where up to 60,000 followers could gather to hear him and his henchmen speak, would be a completely new type of building. Again, he took inspiration from the classical world, this time the Colosseum of ancient Rome.
Hitler often talked about outdoing Rome, both architecturally and in terms of its military power.
The Colosseum is 500 feet wide. Hitler's hall would be 200 feet wider. The architects were told to mimic its design and to use not modern concrete, but only the finest granite. Hitler demanded buildings that would last 1,000 years.
We're in the lower arcade of the Kongresshalle. It has a tier exterior, and it is built out of solid masonry. What we're seeing here is the facing of that masonry interior, which is made out of very, very hard granite. And it's also a very fine grained granite, so it was a very expensive, very high prestigious kind of stone.
Although the exterior of the Congress Hall exudes prosperity and success, the interior was never completed. The onset of war meant the inner walls and foundations lay crumbling and neglected. Paul Jaskett goes in search of what would have been.
We're standing in the interior of what remains of the Congress Hall. There would be banked seating centered on a podium where the party leaders or Hitler would speak. At the top of the hall would have been a colonnade, and then the whole would have been capped by a ceiling which had a very large skylight bringing the natural world inside.
The roof is missing, not collapsed or bombed, but never built. As war loomed, precious resources had to be deployed elsewhere, and the builders never returned to complete the job. Could Hitler's plans for this building ever have been realized?
This would have been 200-meter spanning structure. There was no column support inside, and it's questionable whether they could have done that at this time, and we can certainly do it today.
Using computer technology based on the original plans, it's possible to see how the Congress Hall would have looked had Hitler's engineers completed their task. From here, Hitler would have delivered speeches from a central pulpit to a crowd of over 50,000. Speer and Hitler wanted their structures not just to impress, but overwhelm everyone who entered them. The next phase was to demonstrate this power to a global audience. Germany would host the Olympic Games, and Hitler would have Speer design a new stadium, bigger than any built before or since. In 1934, work began on the largest stadium in Europe. This stadium hosted the 1936 Olympic Games and marked Hitler's arrival on the international stage. It was the next step in his plan to rebuild and rebrand Germany. Located